going to come back and, get grounded. And so the cycle continues. So what do we do? What are some options? What can we do to actually get back to a place of equality where we're seeing people for who they are? We're seeing people on an equal basis where we can relate to them and work together with them. I won't cover all of these for the sake of time, but one of the things that I really want to mention is speaking and thinking of people not as your enemy, but as someone who you can relate to. There was a situation, there was a story that was told at the conference, and I'm sure everyone who was there, you'll remember this, but we were talking about areas, about rivalries in our life that had become hopeless. And there was this one gentleman, he was referring to someone in his life who he was in conflict with, and he referred to her as his enemy. The entire time he was telling the story, we didn't know who she was, except that she was his enemy. And finally, at the end, it came out that it was his stepmom, rivaling with him for his father's time. And Ms. Jean, the facilitator of the discussion, she pointed out, as long as we talk about her as the enemy, we're never going to be able to resolve any conflict. We're never going to be able to come to a place where we're not in rivalry with her. And that really stuck out to me, because how often do we just think of other people as the enemy? Instead, we need to shift our focus to thinking of them as people, real people, who may have a difference of opinion or may have different life experiences. Another thing that stuck out is silence doesn't fix anything. If we just ban difficult discussions at Thanksgiving, sure, that Thanksgiving might not be in conflict, but you're not going to resolve the conflict between the two sides of the family. So if we have an opportunity to create cultures, whether this be in organizations, whether this be in politics, what are some things that we can do to create a safe space? As I'm sure we're all aware, trust is a lot easier to build when you're starting from scratch than when trust has been broken. If you don't know someone, you're a lot more inclined to trust them than if you know someone and they've already broken your trust. The same goes with organizations. If you've created an organization where trust has been broken and a kind of social contract has been violated, then it's very difficult to do anything. So we need to act proactively, not reactively, when we're creating these safe spaces. Appreciate the differences. When I was in Montana, a group from Shriner, as well as some of our Shriner Board of Trustee members and their spouses, we were a group that had never interacted with each other at all. And all of a sudden, we were stuck in the Montana wilderness for 7 days. And it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, because everyone found their place. Everyone had different experiences. Everyone had different skills. And we ran like a well-oiled machine. It could have just as easily gone horribly. And so it really showed me you've got to appreciate the differences and the different backgrounds that people come from and the skills they have for who they are. Even people who disagree with you, they're still rational people. They may be emotional, but they're still rational people. And they're genuinely trying to do what they think is best. I know I'm taking a long time, so I'll finish up here pretty quick. But there's one story that's really stuck out to me. Because through this entire conference, we were constantly talking about having these difficult conversations, about getting together in community with people from opposing sides, about just the best way to resolve conflict is to talk about it, to find a compromise, to find solutions. And for me, my biggest burning question was, how do I make sure that they're not going to hurt me? If I trust them, how do I make sure that they're not going to act in bad faith? And I mentioned that in one of our discussions. And there was another lady at the conference where she works at International University. And sweetest lady on the planet, but day to day she is working with university students that come from war-torn backgrounds. And I don't remember the exact wording of what she said, but the concept of what she said will always stick in my mind. And she she kind of got my attention and she said, "What are you afraid of?" She said, "When bombs are literally falling, that's rock bottom. The only possible way, if you're working in peace, yes, you might get hurt along the way, but it's for things to get better." She said, "You need to be able to take the risk of holding the pain of your enemies. Your enemies, even if they're hurting you, it's because they're in pain too." It made me think about, we always tell kids that are being bullied, your bully is probably feeling left out or insecure, and that's why they're bullied. That doesn't only apply to elementary school. That applies, in real society as well. In addition, we have to consider ourselves, we have to not be a threat. We have to not act like a non-threat. We have to not be a threat. We have to genuinely want reconciliation and conflict resolution. How many times do we walk into a situation, maybe it's a negotiation, and we say we want peace, we say we want the conflict to be resolved, but we still just want to be right. If you're walking into a negotiation and we still want to be right, conflict will not be resolved. And that's what really stuck to me when she told me, with tears on her eyes, because this was real to her. And it brought into perspective for me that sometimes we have to take the first step. We have to take the risk of holding other people's pain so that they can see that we genuinely care, so that we can come to a place where we can actually discuss and find a solution. That's pretty much all I have. If anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them until Ms. Smith tells me to sit down. I go to school at Shrine University, right down the road.
How do you actively now and in the future make use of the knowledge that you've learned in these others?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I'm really focusing on now is creating cultures of safe space. In Delaney, for example, 3 weeks ago we got a completely new set of freshmen in, right? They're coming in with open minds. They want a fresh start. They're leaving behind everything their whole identities in high school. And as RA, I had the opportunity to create a space across the entire dorm where they felt like they could be who they are, where they felt like if there was an issue, they could talk about it, where if they we're starting to feel that rivalry or that conflict with other people, they can do something about it. They don't need to sit on it. And so kind of on the points I touched on before of, appreciating people's differences and teaching the students how, everyone's different, which means they can help you with things that you wouldn't be able to do yourself. And just really seeing that come into action has been absolutely amazing. Just last night, I was working on this presentation in the common room, and someone walked in and was like, "Hey, does anyone have any food?" Right? It was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and they, had forgotten to eat dinner, and like 7 people jumped in and offered them, their entire snack cabinet. And just seeing that, that's kind of the trivial things. But also, 2 nights ago, I had a resident who was just having a really, really tough time. And 25 people came around them and, helped them resolve the conflict they were having with their mom. And it didn't turn into a session where it was like, oh, she's horrible, right? She's that's inclined to happen a lot. They helped her understand that her mom was, being very controlling out of love. She was concerned about her safety. And so just seeing the maturity in the students based off of the culture that, we were able to create, that's what I'm trying to do in every community that I'm in. I'm not sure if that answered your question. Yeah.
So I know one thing you can do go to Washington D.C., get the leaders of both political parties in the same room and go through that damn presentation.
The fact shows he doesn't have to leave Kerrville.
But that's a very good point, because that's a perfect illustration. In today's society, everyone is pushed into a box, right? You're either Republican or you're Democrat. If you're neither, well, if you're neither and you vote different people from different parties for different positions, then your vote doesn't count. How many people who wanted to vote for a third-party candidate in the last election were basically told they were part of the enemy, right? If you were a Trump supporter and someone was voting for the Libertarian candidate, oh, well, you might as well be voting for Joe Biden. You're trying to destroy the country, and vice versa, And so, even as a society, I feel like we need to be careful to not push people into these boxes, right? We need to not stop perpetrating a culture where we're fearful of the other side, because the other side is just trying to do what they think is best. They just have a different perspective.
How old are you?
I'll be 21 in 3
And
weeks.
when did you drop to earth?
Yesterday.
President Charlie has some
I'm sorry?
Your other two case studies on Columbia and Korea, what do you think takeaways on either one of those?
Yeah, so North Korea is very interesting, because instead of the societies being fearful of each other, which they are, the governments are inciting that fear. You have, immediate nuclear families that are being separated, and not being allowed to talk to each other. And one of the biggest takeaways from Korea was, right now it's kind of in a standstill. Nothing can happen as far as getting people together in the same room and talking about it. But one of the biggest takeaways we talked about from that was creating a plan, putting systems in place where even if we get a 30-second opportunity, we already have a plan to take full advantage of those 30 seconds, right? Even if you're in a situation where it's a standstill and nothing can happen, you're not even allowed to, you can still be working behind the scenes so that as soon as the pin drops, you can make change. As far as Colombia, I'm going to be completely honest, I was kind of falling asleep through Colombia. But what I do remember from that presentation was where she talked about we need to prioritize the safety of the people over the safety of the organizations. And this applies to governments, this applies to political parties, corporations, right? Clubs and organizations on campus. If in conflict, we're prioritizing, making the organization look good, we're not going to be able to solve the conflict and legitimize the concerns of the members. Versus if we legitimize the opinions of the members and prioritize their safety, in the case of Colombia, prioritizing the safety of regular citizens just trying to live their lives, then we can use that as the basis for what the organization or the government should be doing. Thank you all so much.
It's been a real pleasure getting to know Noah. He is also one of our Sumner Scholars, so some of you probably were here last year in March when Texas Independence Day. And Noah at that time was a candidate to be a Sumner Scholar, and he was selected as one, so just an extraordinary man. And I also want to talk a little bit, because most of you probably don't realize how the Peace Conference opportunity came about. So Where Bat, who is now a member of this club, but used to be a member of the San Antonio Club, and one of our former trustees at Shriner named Jack McGuire, have been instrumental in helping us put this together. And they approached the Rotary Club of Kerrville and Shriner and said, is there any way that we can get a student from Shriner and that you guys can help support him on this trip to Ireland. And so we met with the president of Shriner, and we talked as a board at Rotary and said, this really needs to happen. We absolutely should figure out a way to do this. So Shriner kind of put out a call for entries for students to apply, and the board of your Rotary Club said, yes, we will donate some funds to this, and Shriner said, we will also donate some funds to this. And so we were able to cover his expenses to go on the trip. Noah was selected from, I think, a group of 7 students. And there, I think, and where you might know better than me, there is some conversation about bringing this peace conference to San Antonio. And if that's the case, next year, we certainly, as a club, will probably want to participate more and maybe even have more participation from Shriner. But this club made this possible for Noah, so give yourselves a huge round of applause. Of course, sincere gratitude to Ware and Jack McGuire. Ware has the same.
Let me just make a comment. This all happened because we asked for a lecturer to come to Kerrville for an election series. And Andy Hill here was at St. Philip's College in San Antonio, recommended Derek Wilson. Derek Wilson is the fellow that organized this peace conference, and he spent his whole life trying to bring the Catholics and the Protestants together in Ireland. And from that, meeting him at Shriner, this whole thing